Hello there, and welcome back to the booth here at Pro Tour Kaladesh. Marshall Sutcliffe with Ian Duke, and we are heading down for round number 2, where we have Brian Kibler playing against Ondrej Strasky, and we've just had a cursory look at these deck lists, and there's some pretty spicy stuff in there. Let's head down to the feature match area. Hello and welcome to coverage of Pro Tour Kaladesh. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Ian Duke. And down in the feature match here, we have one of the most recognizable faces in our game. We've got Brian Kibler, the Hall of Famer, the 2-time Pro Tour champion. And he has a really nice deck lined up. We'll tell you some details about that in a moment. Let's take a look at his opponent. This is Ondrej Strasky. Ondrej in the Hawaiian themed hat there. I love that. Looking good. And he's ready to go on his side of the table. Ondrej from the Czech Republic, of course, is playing red-green this time. Now, he's got a bit of a red-green beatdown deck, but I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about Kibler's deck to start off here, Ian, as this blue-green energy deck is kind of insane. He's got some really nice cards.
Yeah, this is quite the spicy brew. So he's base blue-green with a little bit of black, and he has quite a few rares. I won't necessarily spoil everything that's to come, but we were talking about last round, Marshall. We wanted to see some nonsense happen here in the limited environment, and we might see some nonsense this round. So look forward to that. On the other side of the table, Ondrej Strasky has a much more straightforward red-green deck. He's all about beating down a much more straightforward game plan than what Kibler has. So he will certainly be the aggressor in this matchup, and we'll see how that plays out.
Curious to see how Ondrej's actual draft went. He's got a Voltaic Brawler here, which is certainly an early pick and a card that will lead you down the direction that he ended up going. A Quicksmith Genius here for Ondrej. Not the ideal card for his deck, truth be told. He doesn't have a strong artifact sub-theme going here, but it is still a 3-2, and any extra value that you can get out of it, you'll take. But it is more of a curve creature for him rather than a card that we're going to see him, activate over and over and over again.
Meanwhile, a pretty good start here for Brian Kibler. He's off to the races with that Thriving Turtle, powered up by Ether, Theorist Energy, and then here comes Cultivator's Caravan into Attune with the Ether. So the ether is flowing here for Brian Kibler, and he is advancing his board state very quickly here, Marshall.
You can see that he's already got 3 energy left over. That's after activating that Thriving Turtle twice as well to make it a 2/5. So, yeah, like you said, the energy is flowing here for Kibler, and it will not stop, by the way. He's got a heck of a lot going on when it comes to energy, and he's even got some pretty cool payoffs for it as well as, like you mentioned, some bombs. Now, in order to stay in the colors and do what he wanted to do, he did have to play a couple of cards that he probably wasn't super excited about. He's got a Prakata Pillar Bug in this deck, but he's blue-green. It's, not particularly exciting just as a curve creature, but I'll tell you what, the payoffs that he has managed to come up with are very impressive.
Yeah, it's actually very common for the base blue-green decks to branch out into other colors, and there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the blue-green theme is energy, and when you're playing energy, you want lots and lots of energy cards in your deck, which can sometimes lead you toward splashing other energy cards, or especially finding those really, really promising energy payoff cards, regardless of what color they are. And the second thing is the presence of Attune with the Ether, just allowing you to splash so easily and get you some extra energy to power things up. And speaking of powering things up, here comes Sky Sovereign, console flagship, the legendary vehicle.
That is going to do 3 damage immediately to the Gerper Guide on Ondrej's side of the table. This is going to be a major issue for Ondrej. This is... it's funny to call it a flagship because it's right in the name, but this is really one of the flagship vehicles for the set. And I know that, working in R&D, you guys will have really wanted to kind of showcase what vehicles could be, and we see Sky Sovereign, be that in many ways.
Yeah, who wouldn't want to open a giant, airship with a laser cannon on it, or whatever is dealing that 3 damage on there. I can't say for sure. But yeah, definitely one of the most exciting cards you can open in this limited environment for sure.
Right. Super powerful. You can see it's already dealt 3 damage and killed a creature. And then if Kibler can crew it up, and get it attacking, it can continually mow down creatures. And this is not a happy Ondrej Strasky here. He is way, way behind in this game. And yes, he has 6 cards in his hand, but look at them. Dies to Sky Sovereign, dies to Sky Sovereign, dies to Sky Sovereign. None of those actually do 5 damage unless he can find a couple of artifacts to go with the welding sparks. And Ondrej is going to have an immensely difficult time finding his way out of this position. He's got a blossoming defense that if somehow Kibler were to block with his Sky Sovereign down the line, it could do something. But we're talking pure desperation here. So instead, what Ondrej's going to do here is he's going to try to race. And he's correctly determined that the route to victory, if he were to win this game, is going to be by dealing damage to Brian if Brian tries to engage in a race here against Ondrej. And that was a significant attack with the Spontaneous Artist. He's down to 11 as Kibler. So Kibler may have to reevaluate the board state here and say, okay, can I get you dead before you can get me dead? Or is it time for me to kind of sit back, start crewing up the Sky Sovereign, picking off, your Spontaneous Artist or whatever, and keep that train rolling? So it'll be interesting to see how Kibler approaches this. Another Attune with Ether is what Kibler has pulled to the front here. Kibler, a fairly mana-heavy deck. He does have 16 lands and 3 Attune with Ethers in his deck, which that's a lot of mana sources. And we also saw he has the Cultivator's Caravan as well, which is a threat but also a mana source. Okay, so now we see Kibler go ahead and crew up the Sky Sovereign. He did need to use 2 creatures to do it, but he was able to leave back his big thriving turtle there as a blocker, and of course he killed the Spontaneous Artist with the laser cannon.
Yeah, things looking pretty rough here for Ondrej Strasky. I think he really, really needed to draw. He does have a copy of Appetite for the Unnatural in his deck somewhere. Did not pick it up this turn, unfortunately. And now with that Spontaneous Artist dead, that really kind of closes the door to his game plan of racing. Now no longer able to give his creatures haste. He is in a position where he just can't deal enough damage in time before that Sky Sovereign both picks off his creatures and picks off his life total as well.
And Strasky looks like he's decided just to go ahead and pass the turn back here. Kibler really in a commanding position here. He even has a copy of Tezzeret's Ambition in his hand, which he's casting here, which can set him up for the next few turns, assuming that there are a next few turns. I mean, let's not forget, he's got the Caravan down there as well. That's a crew 3, as is the Sky Sovereign. And that's actually a lethal attack there from Kibler. So what we saw there was Ondrej deciding not to play anything out of his hand, recognizing that he was going to be dead, and just seeing if Kibler would give him a little bit more information about the type of cards in his deck and what he might face. So that's going to do it for the first game. We'll be back right after these messages.
Check out Kaladesh Draft Leagues on Magic Online. Build a deck at your own pace and play at your convenience. Draft anytime, play anytime. For more information, visit mtgo.com.
And welcome back to the feature match area here in Hawaii. You can see we've got a lot of big names battling it out. Let's take a look at our table down on the left part of your screen there. That's Paul Rietzel versus Steve Rubin. Both players sitting at 1-0. And whoa, we have come into quite a board state here, Ian. A lot of permanents on the battlefield.
Wow.
But a lot of them are... Oh, look at Paul's deck. That's a Panharmonicon in between the Prophetic Prism.
And a Deadlock Trap.
And a
as well.
Deadlock Trap. And
So lots of rares
am
here.
I seeing 13 energy for Rietzel right now?
I think we are. Wow, holy smokes.
You know, this is a big departure from what we normally see from Paul. You know, he really enjoys playing those low-to-the-ground aggressive decks, which, by the way, you can play in this format, but it looks like he's gone a little bit of a different direction here, Ian, and he's going deep. This definitely qualifies as nonsense. But
Yeah, I totally agree. This is as nonsense gets. And this looks like a pretty cool version of, we were talking about the blue-white deck revolving around enter the battlefield triggers and, you know, possibly blinking or bouncing, replaying your creatures. Panharmonicon fits great into that archetype.
yeah, if you're going to be trying to maximize on those things anyway, Panharmonicon puts that type of interaction just completely over the top. Takes a little while to get your value back from the Panharmonicon, but usually once it gets rolling, just you just don't look back.
Yeah, I think that was a card that a lot of players underrated very early on in the format because it just kind of looks like a do-nothing. Like, I don't want to spend 4 mana on this and pass the turn and not advance my board. But the card can be quite powerful in the right deck, for sure.
Yeah, we've talked about it last round, but you will often find yourselves in this format when you find yourself in the middle part of a game similar to this, and you're trying your darndest to overpower your opponent, and there are a lot of different tools to do that, and Panharmonicon is one of them.
No responses. Got pay 1 down to 11 and scry. Yep.
So this is Paul Rietzel using his Ether Theorist to scry.
My upkeep, pay 1 down to 10, scry.
And he's going to do this once again. He's clearly digging for some action here, and he's found it. He put that card back on top. Sure, we'll see what it was right away here. Oh, it's a Whirler Virtuoso. Now that is going to trigger twice thanks to the Panharmonicon. That's going to give him 6 energy, and he can use the Whirler Virtuoso. He can pay 3 energy to make a 1/1 Flying Thopter, and he is now at 16 energy. Not bad, not bad. So he can just start creating these Thopters at his will, and his engine is now online here. He's got these Ether Theorists finding him action, the Panharmonicon fueling the fire, and he is going to be able to create an army of flyers in a real hurry here. Now, the good news for Steve Rubin is that the Renegade Freighter doesn't particularly care about 1/1s. I mean, sure, if you want to stack a bunch of them on it, but you got to put a ton of them on it.
You know what it does care about, though, is Deadlock Trap.
Deadlock Trap, that's right. And that's a good place for Paul to use some of that energy.
Energy.
Yeah, Deadlock Trap is a fantastic card against vehicles, actually.
Really is. I mean, Rubin forced him to do this, and you at least encouraged him. And that is Gonti there attacking. 2/3 with Death Touch.
Pay 3, make a Thopter.
Down to 12 energy. Pay 3, make a Thopter. Pay 3, make a Thopter. And are we just going to see 3 of these Thopters jump in the way? Maybe he's got another card he doesn't mind losing.
More and make a Thopter. Okay.
No, 3 of them.
I will. I can block, right? Yeah, block's fine. Quadruple block with these 4. All right, I'll order 2 Thopters. Okay.
Okay, so that worked out well for Rietzel. He blocked with all of his Thopters and a servo. And Steve Rubin said, okay, fine. I'll trade off Gonti. Rubin did say that he passed Rietzel a lot of rares.
It looks like it.
Does seem to be the case here.
So they were sitting next to each other in the draft then.
Mm-hmm. The Panharmonicon kind of the highlight at the moment.
Play Glassblower's Puzzle.
Here's a Glassblower's Puzzle Knot,
Double triggers.
which triggers twice.
Scry 1, Scry 2.
That's an era of innovation that he's about to put on top of his library, I
Oh,
believe.
wow. That's huge, Marshall.
Yeah, the era of innovation plus the Whirler Virtuoso
Then I'm just going to
And God, if you put Panharmonicon in this mix, it probably just gets completely absurd. But that's an engine that is going to be very, very difficult for for Steve to beat. He is going to be able to put Thopters on the battlefield at will here. And I want to see him do it. I want to see this happen.
Yeah, this could be
This is
bananas
insane.
here in this coming turn. And if that combination does come up here in this this coming turn, we'll be sure to break it down for you guys at home, because there's some pretty complicated stuff going on in these type of decks.
I think Steve Rubin wishes that he had something a little more complicated going on his side of the board. Right now, he's just kind of got a few creatures that aren't great at attacking at the moment. Here's an Etherborn Marauder from Rubin. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any +1/+1 counters on his creatures to steal, so it's just going to be a 2/2 flying lifelink, which is reasonable, but not going to be enough here, especially given the flood of Thopters we're about to see from Rietzel.
Yeah, so Rietzel just deciding if he wants to scry here or sacrifice the Puzzle Knot.
But he's actually not going to scry because he knows what's on top
That's
and he
right.
wants it.
So here's the Era of Innovation. So
Yeah.
breaking this down for everyone here. Era of Innovation. Okay.
Oh,
so they're packing
Ruben
it up.
scooped.
But just to give you a quick synopsis of what's going on there. Era of Innovation says whenever an artifact enters the battlefield, you can pay 1 to make 2 energy.
Yeah, or
Artificer,
Artificer.
so lets you spend 3 energy to make a Thopter. So if you spend 3 energy, you make a Thopter, and you actually get 2 triggers then of the Era of Innovation due to the Panharmonicon. You can spend 2 mana to make 4 energy. So you only spent 3 energy, but you got a Thopter and 4 energy back. So for every 2 mana you spend, you can get a Thopter and an energy, and just keep doing that as many times as you have mana to do it.
And unfortunately for us, Steve Rubin was aware of this interaction and wanted to have none of it.
Yeah, no fun.
He's
No
good.
fun.
Yeah, no, you can't blame him. That would not be fun for him to watch that. But Paul ends up taking over. All right, let's head back to our main match here, where we've got Ondrej Strasky against Brian Kibler. And Kibler kicking things off with a way that we'll see him kick things off pretty consistently here with 3 copies of Attunement of Ether. And in his deck, he'll fire one off on turn 1 pretty often.
So Thriving Grubs hitting the battlefield here for Ondrej Strasky on the play. A little bit of a slower start from Brian this game. No Thriving Turtle on turn 1, instead developing his mana a little bit with Attune with Ether. And this is what Strasky wants to see. He wants to get on the board early and really apply pressure to Brian Kibler, because as we saw in game 1, Kibler's deck is full of rares and full of power as the game goes long.
Kibler elects to just do nothing here. He is holding a Select for Inspection in his hand, and he's going to go ahead and fire that off right now. That basically encourages Ondrej to use up that energy so he can't use it for something else and then return this Thriving Grubs to his hand. Now, the downside, of course, for Kibler is that when Ondrej does replay the Grubs, he'll get the 2 energy back anyway, but this means he's taking 0 damage, tying up a lot of Ondrej's mana in these critical early stages, and trying to get Brian to the point where he can start casting, for example, Sky Sovereign, which I believe he has in his hand. Ondrej's going to go ask the judge a question. I'm assuming it's related to the question about the timing on when he actually decides to put the energy on and how that part works.
Now, it may actually be, Marshall, that Ondrej has Ornamental Courage
Oh, that's
in
definitely
his hand
what
here,
it
and
is.
that can untap a creature. So I
Yes.
believe what he's checking here is Select for Inspection requires that you target a tapped creature in order to return it to the owner's hand. And actually, if you cast Ornamental Courage on that creature and untap it, it will no longer be a tapped creature anymore, which means it's not a valid target for Select for Inspection.
Yeah.
And that'll cause the Select for Inspection to basically fail as a spell. It has no more legal targets.
That's exactly how that works, and it's going to work for Ondrej, so that's a good start for him. Updates from our back table as well. Magnus Lanto and Jacob Wilson are tied at 1 game apiece. They're going to game 3. That worked out pretty well there for Ondrej, as well as he had a Sage of Shayla's Claim as the follow-up play. And there's one of the payoff that we talked about. There's a Dynavolt Tower now for Kibler. We saw that his deck has the ability to generate a large amount of energy, and you can see if he can, save up a bunch, 5 to do 3 damage to a creature or player, that can end the game pretty quickly, especially against a deck like Ondrej Strasky's that does have a lot of smaller creatures. You see him put the +1/+1 counter on his Pima Outrider just in the event that that Dynavolt Tower gets active, as Kibler's already at 2 energy.
So things getting a little bit tight here for Brian Kibler. He wants to get that Dynavolt Tower online. It looks like he has a couple instants and sorceries in his hand to help him do that.
I think he has an Attune with Ether in his hand that he actually saved. He didn't play it on the turn 2 because he wanted to take advantage of this Dynavolt Tower, because Dynavolt Tower is going to give him 2 energy just for casting an instant or sorcery, and then of course he gets 2 energy from Attune as well. And since he wasn't going to miss a land drop, he decided to hold it in his hand. The turn where he used Select for Inspection, he had it, and he could have cast it alongside it, but he very correctly, I think here, decided to wait to make sure that his Dynavolt Tower was fully charged, as it were.
And that'll boost Brian up to 6 energy. He can spend 5 of it on the Dynavolt Tower to deal 3 damage, takes out that Thriving Grubs.
Save the Gremlins. Well, that still isn't going to help him out against his Pima Outrider, though. It's a lot of damage.
We do see in Kibler's hand he has an Ether Trade Winds. He could use that if he wants to buy a little bit of time. Unfortunately, he'd have to either return the Dynavolt Tower or a land to his hand, which will set him back.
We also had in our back tables Paulo Vitor Damarosa versus Marcio Carvalho, and Paulo won 2-1. So he improves to 2-0, while Marcio is going to be 1-1 after we saw him win his match on camera last round. And that is a rarity for Marcio to lose a limited match here at the PT. He did not do much of that last year. Okay, so he did, in fact, decide not to put himself back on land drops. He decided to return the Dynavolt Tower. Now, he still gets the energy from casting an instant or sorcery, so he is up to 3 energy anyway. He can recast the tower when it's more appropriate, but he is going to need to find an answer pretty quickly for that Pima Outrider, because it's going to come back down. It's interesting that Strasky's thinking this much as well. I think if I'm Kibler, I may be thinking, does he have a spontaneous artist? And he's deciding whether he wants to just hit me for 5 right now.
But taking a look at Strasky's hand, I believe what he's thinking about here is the Oval Chase Dragster versus replaying the Pima Outrider.
Okay.
And elects just to attack rather than play the Oval Chase Dragster. And I like that play a lot because you can always play the Dragster next turn and then have both the Pima Outrider and the Dragster attacking. Makes sense to save his haste creature for a surprise attack on what could be the last turn of the game.
Okay, and here we go. The big play for Brian Kibler. He's got that Sky Sovereign. He's going to use it. Unfortunately for him, he is going to be facing a ton of damage here. Probably just going to take 6 this turn and drop down to 2. And you saw that look from Kibler. You know, he set up the Dynavolt Tower, but ultimately, you know, it was like kind of slow welding sparks there, right? Like, you know, the second time you activate it and kill another creature is when you're really starting to kind of take over with a card like that. But you know, all he did was use 1 card to kill 1 card so far with it. It wasn't super impressive there. And while Sky Sovereign is a bomb, you know, it is a vehicle. And Kibler has yet to put any other creatures on the battlefield here. And that means that Ondrej Strasky has free reign to just rumble, and he can do it any number of ways here. He's really trying to plan out how these next couple of turns are going to go. He knows that he can get Kibler down to 2, or he can get him down to 4, but develop his board further and save the Oval Chase Dragster for a surprise attack the next turn after that.
Yeah, I really like just playing the Dragster and getting in for 6 here, and the reason for that is if Kibler does have a creature that can crew the Sky Sovereign, that will leave Strasky with basically no vulnerable targets that could take 3 damage and die.
Oh, good point.
Whereas if Strasky just plays the Quicksmith Genius, then he's leaving himself with a vulnerable creature. Sure enough, does take that line, gets in for 6, dropping Kibler to 2, and it's all going to come down to what Kibler picks up this turn. Let's take a look.
It's so tough because he's going to need, like, even if he played a 4/4 here, it's not good enough. If Strasky has any way to crew the Dragster, he can just attack with both of his Tramplers.
Yeah, it looks to me like Kibler did pick up a Pima Outrider of his own, but I'm not sure this is going to be enough. So, for example, he can play the Pima Outrider, and that'll allow the Outrider itself to crew the Sky Sovereign as well as making a servo. But the trouble is that Dragster has Trample.
Has Trample, and so does the Pima Outrider. Oh, it is interesting. I mean, at this point, Kibler's going to have to just assume that Strasky doesn't have a lot going on. Probably make the line that you said. That does leave him a viable block here, as he can activate the Sky Sovereign and block the Oval Chase Dragster and go to 1. All right, so Kibler had activated his Sky Sovereign to shoot the Oval Chase Dragster, but Ondrej reminded him that, unless he's crewed it for the turn, it's not actually in creature mode, and you can't target it. So he says, oh, then in that case, I'm dead. Mm-hmm. As it turns out, he was. We did see that Ondrej had a way to crew the Dragster and still attack with the Pima Outrider, so he was going to be taking lethal there, but... All right, let's take a look at Magnus Lanto versus Jacob Wilson in their game 3 on that back table there. And what are these two up to? Well, Lanto has one of the stronger color combinations in my estimations with black and white. And it looks like he's got a Gonti of his own there, as well as a Foundry Screecher.
So we've heard Luis talk a couple times about how he likes black-white because you can be either aggressive or more controlling. Looks like Magnus's deck is a little bit more on the controlling side here, given that he has that Consulate Skygate. He's got a Gonti for kind of more mid-game value.
Oh, by the way, that Gonti just let Magnus cast Jacob's own unlicensed disintegration.
Wow, that is some value.
That's pretty good, yeah. Yeah, you see also a Consulate Skygate holding back that Snarethopter, and bad news / good news for Magnus. He's going to take a look at Jacob's hand here, but he sees 3 lands, so it's like, again, I think that's like, on one hand he missed, but on the other hand there's really nothing coming, so he's probably pretty happy with that. The Harsh Scrutiny in the main deck for Magnus as well. That is not a sideboard card for him. Oh, and here's a Cloud Blazer now for Magnus. He's splashing that off of a Prophetic Prison, and this is a huge turn of events for Magnus because he has been able to hold back Jacob Wilson's board since we've jumped in, with, again, the Snarethopter being held back by the Consulate Skygate, and then Gonti threatening to trade off for either the creatures on the ground, the Servant of the Conduit or the Thriving Rhino. So no really good options here for Jacob. But now the threats are really starting to grow in the air here for Magnus, and of course the extra 2 life and the extra 2 cards off the Cloud Blazer could really set him up to finish this game strong. All right, and just to further keep the damage flowing here for Lanto, he's found revoke privileges. Not even going to let him trade off here. He's just going to lock down the flyer and start getting in. Wow, here's an Ether Storm Rock as well. So it has been all Lanto since we've came to this one. Jacob Wilson has yet to cast a spell, and he has fallen further and further and further behind here. And Magnus looks to be in a good position to improve to 2-0 here if he can just finish off Jacob in the next turn. And he's got lethal in the air, so I wouldn't be surprised if he were able to do so. Lots of lands here for Wilson. Okay, well, this could help stem the bleeding a little bit.
That's Rush of Vitality, giving lifelink and +1/+1 to the or +1/+0 to the Thriving Rhino. Takes out the Skygate, gains 4 life for Jacob Wilson.
Basically, buy him a turn. But he's going to need to find something pretty special off the top of his library here if he's going to defeat the flying army that Magnus has assembled here.
This is a pretty sweet deck as well that Magnus has. Just
Yeah,
a very grindy mid-game kind of deck.
yeah. Magnus actually, if you were able to play a creature here, would have the ability to get Jacob down to 1. Though the difference between 1 and 2 isn't significant here, at least from what I can see. So he's probably not incentivized to use the Ether Storm Rock, even if he did get that extra energy from a creature. So we'll likely just see an attack with the Flyers, drop Jacob down to 2, and then set up for the win the next turn. This is one of those positions where Magnus is firmly in the lead, looking good, and he's basically just going over his options on, well, if I were to lose this game, what would that look like? And is there anything I should or could do to avoid it? Does attacking with all 3 get me the same clock either way? These are the questions that he's going to go through. And especially now that Jacob's just taken it, he's going to know this is probably just about game.
Yeah, I can't think of too much that gets Jacob out of this situation. And sure enough, that will be the game and the match going to Magnus Lanto.
That's right. So Magnus is going to improve to 2-0 in his pod and look to come out of here at a 3-0 if he can. All right, looks like Kibler's having some mana issues here, which I'm actually surprised by. He's mulliganing to 5.
Ouch.
Yes, so that could be tough for him, especially given that Strasky's deck is quite aggressive.
And given that Brian's deck is pretty synergy based, you know, he's got these.
That was a very politically correct way to say slow.
Well, you know, we saw Dynavolt Tower in the
Yes.
first game that clearly requires, you know, either other cards that are producing energy or instants and sorceries to go with it. Even Sky Sovereign, you know, we saw Brian really without a great way to crew his Sky Sovereign in
Yeah.
the previous game.
I mean, he played Sky Sovereign that game and lost.
Yeah.
Like, it's not supposed to happen, is it?
Lost convincingly as well from that position. So, yeah, it's one of the drawbacks of vehicles is they do require a crew to operate.
All right, so Kibler has kept his 5-card hand and is now considering his Scry 1. Of course, we use the Vancouver Mulligan rule, which has been great, by the way. Now, the real question here, though, you know, from a spectator perspective is, can Ondrej have a good curve? He doesn't need anything spectacular, most likely, because like you said, Kibler's going to have cards that have a hard time affecting the board, and he's already down to 5. So, you know, Ondrej could stand to win this by curving out in just a reasonable creature-based way. Here you go, 2, 3, 4 or something, and Kibler's going to be way up against it. But if he doesn't, we do know that Kibler's deck looks much better in the late game than Strasky's, and Kibler could come back. Kibler also has ways to draw cards built into his deck, like Tezzeret's Ambition and such, that if the game were to go late, you know, those can get you right back out of the mess of a mulligan to 5 here. So really the pressure's on Strasky here. He just needs to put out as much beef as he can. Uh-oh. How about a Voltaic Brawler?
Yeah, that's some beef right there for sure. But Kibler picks up a Wild Wanderer there.
This is interesting. The Wild Wanderer trades off for either of the creatures if it survives.
And importantly, Kibler has a Cowl Prowler in his hand as well.
Which is huge.
And this helps him curve into it next
turn
on turn 5.
Okay,
So that was about the best draw Brian could have picked up that turn in the Wild Wanderer. So awesome for him. On the other side of the battlefield, though, Ondrej has his aggressive start that his deck is looking for, and his hand is looking pretty loaded. Let's take a look at that. Just plenty of gas in the tank here in the form of more creatures curving out, as well as an ornamental courage to help him keep making those attacks safely.
Kibler's going to go for a trade with the Thriving Grubs here.
Only 3.
Since it doesn't have trample, it is a little bit lower power, right? He's going to take 4 from the Voltaic Brawler, but he's going for a more safe trade here. And here's Ornamental Courage, though. And this is exactly what Kibler does not want to see, right? A couple of potent creatures backed up by a combat trick or two. When you mulligan to 5 and your deck is already synergy-based, you're going to have a really hard time winning that game, especially if Ondrej has a 3-drop that he can play here, like maybe a 3-powered 3-drop. Yeah, he does. He's got the Quicksmith Genius. This is just going to be very difficult for Kibler. Let's see if he can do it, though. It's not impossible. Boom. 6/6. Flavor text. Go. These are some of the cards that tend to sneak into your list when you do spend a lot of high picks on cards like Attune with Ether or, cards like that you're looking to really enable your other cards. Is sometimes you have to just play, a Cowl Prowler. It's fine, right? Look at it here. It looks pretty decent.
Yeah, representing a pretty big brick wall here against Ondrej Strasky's smaller creatures. But with Brian Kibler down to 13, Strasky's in a position where he might just be able to keep attacking with his creatures and replacing them each turn and just chipping through damage and win over the course of 2 or 3 turns by doing that. And although Strasky's out of tricks and out of ways to get past that Cowl Prowler, he might just be willing to throw away creatures to get in damage.
His hand looks pretty good. He's got Pia Nalar. That about explains it. You got a chance to look at the expression of Kibler, and he just is not getting a break here. He was really hoping that Ondrej would stumble at some point, just like miss a creature slot of your curve or miss one land drop or just not have the trick the one time to get the trade. He needed something to go right because it actually has gone fairly well for Kibler. Like you said, hitting that Wild Wanderer into the Prowler here is actually pretty good, but now Ondrej's just going to use Pia Nalar. He's going to, I always view it as like throwing the artifact at a creature to kind of stun it.
I think of like the Thopter buzzing around the creature's head, just being really annoying, and it's sitting there trying to swat it, not paying attention.
But in your story, it does eventually get swatted out of the air because you don't get it back.
That's true.
But yeah, and that means that the Prowler doesn't get to block, and that's all that Ondrej needed. Just the one turn of attacking with all of his creatures and having them all survive just makes it near impossible. Kibler fought the good fight here. He really did. And it looked like a mulligan to 5 maybe was something that he could recover from. But when he sat down, he was hoping that Ondrej didn't do this. This is exactly what he didn't want Ondrej to do. And Ondrej very unkindly did not oblige him.
Yeah, but on the flip side, I think if Brian had a draw similar to this but wasn't on a mulligan to 5, he very well may have been able to withstand this draw from Ondrej Strasky. So just kind of the confluence of both, having a mulligan a couple times as well as having a little bit of a slow start here against Ondrej's draw, which has been fantastic this game.
This is a big turn for Kibler, though. He did add 3 creatures to his board state here. Yeah, you can see how quickly Ondrej's playing, and you could tell that he had the win lined up, and he did exactly have the win lined up. He needed to play the Kujar Seed Sculptor to make Pia Nalar a 3/3, making her a lethal threat. Then he used Welding Sparks to kill any blocker, and then he can attack with everything, and all of his threats were lethal, and that did it. That was Ondrej Strasky beating Brian Kibler 2-1, which is going to bring us to our last match here in round 2. Where we've got Paul Rietzel and Steve Rubin.
Check out. Oh, sure. So I have 7 still.
And I cannot wait to see more of this deck from Paul Rietzel here. I was looking at the deck list a few minutes ago, and yeah, he went very deep. Let's just put it that way. He's got an animation module, which I think I saw on the battlefield as well. That's the rare module. You can take a look at it on the right-hand side of your screen. That one's good. Once you get that chain rolling, it's very powerful. Now, you do need to get a +1/+1 counter on one of your creatures to make it work, though. And that's also assuming that you have creatures, which Paul did not. And I'm assuming we're going to game 3 here, as Paul is all the way down to 3 and had no discernible board state. So, yeah, we're going to get a game 3. You know, not happy or sad about the outcome of that particular game, but I'm very happy that we get to see another game with this deck from Rietzel.
I totally agree. I love to see these kind of wackier, we call them, Johnny or Jenny type decks after the player psychograph of the player who just likes to do something cool, I assemble, a bunch of cards that combine together in a unique way, or just win the game in a flashy or spectacular fashion. That's very unusual compared to how normal Magic games conclude. And there's a lot of that going on in this set. This is a very, very Johnny or Jenny type Magic set. And there's some pretty cool things you can do, even here in Limited.
Take a look at the trophy there. Looks like some ether has escaped it. And, of course, you can take a look at the beautiful feature match area that we have here in Hawaii. And, of course, the beautiful Tim Willoughby as well as he enters cards into the iPads. That's how we get the card lists on the side of your screen, by the way. Is like this round we have Gabby and Tim, and they actually type them in by hand and then publish them, and then we can show them to you once they're ready to go. By the way, we get the Kibler story here in the background as well, for those of you that like to multitask. Okay, so this is a good start here from Ruben. It's a Fretwork Colony on turn 2, and that's really when you want that card. It gets a +1/+1 counter every one of your upkeeps. You do lose a life, and no, it can't block. But against a deck like what Paul Rietzel is doing, this card can absolutely dominate. Wow, this is a real start here from Ruben. Also, I noticed that the players are playing very quickly. I'm going to assume that they have noticed that the clock may be getting a little low. You can see when the pace really quickens, and that's usually what that means. Looks like they got about 10 minutes left in their round here. So they're just making sure that in case this game does go long, remember that's what Rietzel's trying to do, that this can go. And wow, Paul Rietzel has the combo set up. He's got a creature with a +1/+1 counter, and he has animation module, and he could really start to take over the game. Now, usually you want to do this a little bit later in the game, right? Like this becomes your late game mana sink, and you're still just going to cast spells for the first part, but Paul's playing Dynavolt Tower here. This is great. Oh, and there's an Ether Theorist here, which actually gets him to the requisite 5 energy. All right, so he's going to use the Dynavolt Tower. And by the way, that's a fabrication module that he has on the battlefield right now. Which I mistook for an animation module, which he also has in his deck, by the way. It's just that's not the one that he happened to have on the battlefield. So that's why you can see the Thriving Ibex has picked up an additional +1/+1 counter, because when he played the Ether Theorist, he got an energy. That triggers it. Now, this isn't quite as powerful as his other combo, but it's still quite good, and he is going to be able to generate a significant advantage from it and maybe get that Dynavolt Tower rolling as well. A little expensive, but he could do it. Okay. Oh, no. Here's Era of Innovation.
Wow.
All right, so
And that is a glint.
play Fabricators on the stack. This thing goes on the
Sleeve
stack.
Artisan. You can hear
First,
Paul.
I'll pay for the Artificer coming into play. Fabricate's still on the stack. I get 2 energy. This thing triggers. I'll put a +1/+1 counter on my...
I'm just letting him do it.
Flint Sleeve Artisan. Then the
Fabricate.
Fabricator resolves. I'll get a Servo. Sure.
Unfortunately, he doesn't have the mana that is an artifact during the battlefield. If he had one additional mana, he could pay for the Era of Innovation again. The really cool part about Era of Innovation, by the way, is that it plays in two distinctly different ways. Sometimes you just get to 6 energy and draw 3 cards. That's the name of the game. That's what you're trying to do, and you're happy with that. But also, it does act as kind of an engine card, where whenever an artificer or an artifact enters the battlefield, you can pay that and get the 2 energy. And if you have other stuff to do with the 2 energy, then you actually want to keep it on the battlefield and keep these engines rolling, rather than just immediately sacrifice it once you get to 6. So we'll see what Paul wants to do. He is out of gas. He was able to just dump his entire hand on the battlefield. So if he can pick up a few more energy to get up to 6, he may just want to crack and draw.
So actually, really unfortunate turn of events here for Paul Rietzel. Gonti comes down for Steve Rubin and actually steals the Whirler Virtuoso out of Paul Rietzel's deck. So that card
That's what he took with it?
Face down in exile. I believe it is a Whirler.
Did you see it when he looked?
I did.
Okay, because it is face down. Like, Paul won't know that.
That's right. But that did mean the Whirler Virtuoso was coming up in the next 4 cards for Paul. And if he was able to assemble that plus Era of Innovation, well, we've seen how powerful that combination can be.
Game.
Yeah.
Dynabolt Tower targeting your Pia.
Okay, so you see that Paul found a pretty nice one off the top anyway with the Thriving Turtle, and that gave him a counter there, but also enough energy to get the Dynavolt Tower active again, and he took out Pia Nalar with it, fearing that Thopter actually could become a real enough threat that if Steve just started dumping a bunch of mana to pump it with Pia Nalar, that the Thopter could kill him and that there could be more later. So now the Dynavolt Tower has exhausted Paul's energy resources once again, but hey, I mean, he's killing real creatures with it.
And Paul out of cards in hand, but with a pretty good board presence here. Bunch of big, high-toughness creatures back to block.
Ruinous Gremlin does eventually kill the tower, but the damage is done. That thing, mowed down a couple of cards already. So Paul is going to have to live with that. And now he's going to enter combat here. Gonti is going to try to trade with a Thriving Ibex.
Getting energy. A counter on my servo. 15.
Okay, and that trade is going to happen. But before damage, Paul is going to get an energy from his fabrication module and then put the counter on the +1/+1 servo, on the 1/1 servo, which is going to get in for an additional damage. It's a night market lookout here, and there we go. Whirler Virtuoso, and Paul says, yep, that's mine. That was the one that Gonti stole.
That's right. Yep.
And let's see what Paul can come up with here. He's on 0 energy at the moment.
Attack.
And Paul's just going to keep chipping in there with a servo that is growing larger.
Yep.
So Ruben's going to use his Whirler Virtuoso to make a Thopter before blocks. And then he's actually not going to block. Looks like he was kind of hemming and hawing. He decided ultimately not to. So the fabrication module is going to get activated.
11 to 14.
That's going to get him Paul an energy. It's also going to make the servo one bigger. And then of real key importance here is that Ether Theorist, right? He's getting 1 energy, and he can use that to scry whenever he wants to. And is that the animation module?
Okay.
It sure is.
Puts me to 3. Use that to put a counter on my Ether Theorist.
So taking a look at animation module here. Now it says whenever Paul places a +1/+1 counter on a permanent he controls, he can pay a mana to make a servo. So the loop he's got going on here is he can activate fabrication module, get an energy. That causes him to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature he controls. That causes the animation module to trigger. He can then pay a mana to get a 1/1 servo. That causes an era of innovation to trigger. He can pay a mana to get 2 energy.
Gross.
And now that he's gotten more energy, he can trigger his fabrication module.
Which it does automatically.
Module to
Here we go.
put a counter on this, and then activate this to make a servo. Okay. So take 3. Yep. You're 10. Your turn.
Now, Steve Rubin did use Tidy Conclusion to take down that one servo that had been pumped up a bunch to kind of stem the bleeding here, because Paul was able to pretty cleanly attack with that multiple times. He's also trying to get in there with these Thopters. Appreciate that the players have been playing quickly as well, because you could see that they saw this type of situation coming as a potential outcome for the game and wanted to make sure that they could do it.
Yep.
There's 2 energy from Thriving Rats, but that also just means another Thopter if Steve wants it.
Yep.
Harness light main on the servo.
Yep.
Spend 1.
So they've got 2 minutes
Yep.
until turns are called here.
Sure. So I go to 11. I'll block the Whirler Virtuoso. Take 3 and go to 8.
Your turn.
Both players just chipping away.
You had the 2 extra minutes.
Oh, Rietzel has to feel like he's in a good spot. Oh, and there's confiscation coup for Rietzel.
Goodness.
So I end up going up 1 energy.
And he's going to steal back his own Whirler Virtuoso, and this is going to get disgusting.
Theorist. Sure. The counter gets on. I
Watch
pay
this.
1, make a servo.
Sure.
Servo comes into play. Pay 1, gain 2 energy. I'll put a counter on my Ether Theorist. And I will declare my
Now,
attack with.
if you guys want to use the new feature on Twitch to make a clip, this might be a good time to do it, because Paul is going off here. And wait till next turn, too. Well, there's a Sky Skiff now for Steve Rubin. The problem is that Steve had managed to get mildly ahead in the Thopter fight here, and now he is going to be way, way behind in it.
Yep.
All right. Attack. Trigger.
7, 11. Yep. Go ahead. Block. Block with this.
Yep.
Okay.
So you see the servo jump in front
On
of the
the
night
servo.
market lookout.
Block this with a servo.
Okay.
And we are
You said go up to that?
almost 2 extra turns here.
Lookout should be dead, right?
Yep. Yeah. All right. Make 2 Thopters on your end step.
That's time, so it's his end step. So
Okay,
turn
turn
0,
one.
you'll be turn 1.
So Paul looks like he's turn 1. Now we'll see the pace of play even out a little bit. And let's see what kind of shenanigans Paul can put together here. And if he can win. I mean, Steve's at 11. Paul able to pretty seamlessly switch gears here from being turbo mode to now, okay, I'm going to take a look and see what my game plan is for the next couple of turns.
Okay.
Just those guys.
All right.
Yeah, thinking.
So the Sky Skiff got crewed, and it is now a creature.
Okay, good.
Paul kind of feigned like he was going to tap some mana there, but then just said, no, it's okay.
Okay, I have no effects. So I lose these guys. This is dead. Go.
Turn 2.
So turn 0 was Ruben, turn 1 was Paul. Now that we're on turn 2. You can see on the bottom of the screen there for Ruben. So that means that Paul is in the enviable position of getting both the third and fifth turn. So he's got 2 turns to just go off here and try to put up enough of an army in the sky. to kill Ruben. Oh, but there's welding sparks for Ruben, and he's going to target the Whirler Virtuoso, which is really a key part of the engine here for Paul. So let's see what he can come up with.
Has to ether trade winds.
Oh, he's got Ether Trade Winds. That bounces one of his permanents and one of Steve's, so he's going to kill a Thopter
And then I'll put a counter.
on Steve's side and save his Whirler Virtuoso.
Got it done. Yep. This is turn 3.
Correct. Looks like he found a revoke privileges, though I think Rietzel's bigger concern is getting Ruben dead rather than him dying himself.
Play Whirler Virtuoso. So I get 3 energy, and then I'll use it to put a counter on my Thriving Turtle. The counter gets put on my Thriving Turtle. I'll pay 1 and
Make a servo.
make a servo.
Then that's going to trigger the era.
Innovation, which pay 1. I get 2 energy for that. Which triggers my fabrication module to put a counter on my Thriving Turtle. Counter gets put on my Thriving Turtle, triggering this. So I pay 1 and get another servo.
This is just absurd.
Innovation, I'll pay 1, gain 2 energy, so I go up to 8 energy. And the energy I will place, what this thing triggers, and I'll put a counter onto, again, onto Thriving Turtle.
Was that a good turn, Ian?
I'd say so.
Oh, man. The engine fully online for Paul Rietzel. And like I said, that was turn 3. This is 4 now. And Paul, though, is in an interesting position where he does need to make sure that he can kill him. And actually, Paul's going to show him 2 different removal spells to take down both creatures. He's already got lethal on the battlefield. And Paul Rietzel puts together the pieces of the puzzle there.
Yeah, the master inventor there.
Wow. And finishes strong there with his combination of modules and era of innovation with Whirler Virtuoso. It's not easy to put all of those pieces together, but when you do, how crazy is that? We got our nonsense, Ian. We did it.
Sure did.
We also have one more round of draft to cover for you here today, but before we do, let's head to the news desk and Rich Hagan.
Thanks very much to Marshall and Ian Duke. One more round of Limited coming your way. Plenty of great Limited chat as well. We've got a draft viewer coming right up in a few minutes. But out on the floor is Brian David Marshall. He is with a Brazilian former world champion from 2002 and a man who really knows his way around this Limited format, the winner of Grand Prix Atlanta last weekend. It's Carlos Ramao.
Thanks, Rich. I'm here on the floor with world champion Carlos Ramao, also Grand Prix Sao Paulo champion, Grand Prix Atlanta champion, having a good run the last couple of months here.
Yeah. I just won GP Sao Paulo, back-to-back GP Atlanta, and I'm qualified for both Hawaii here and Dublin, so I'm expecting a very good season. I'm trying to get back to the train, and I had a pretty amazing start, right?
You now, it's how long has it been since you played on the Pro Tour? Has it actually been since the last Pro Tour Hawaii?
No, actually, it was, I think, 2013. I'm not pretty sure. It's the Pro Tour that you guys implemented the Planeswalker points. So I got the invite through the Planeswalker points, and that one was my last Pro Tour.
How how does it feel? How does it feel coming back to the Pro Tour after a couple of years away?
Oh, it feels great. Actually, right now it's better. Like, we have a bunch of Brazilians doing good, and we have a strong team. So I have people to test with. We have Paulo is testing for other people, but we have Thiago, Willie, and the other guys. So it's very, very good. I'm very, very excited for this season.
It's very different than when you won the World Championship, when it was like, wow, it's a Brazilian player has won the World Championship, and it was kind of the exception. And now we see Brazilian players doing well all the time.
Yeah, when I won the World Championship, it was like a breakthrough for the Brazilian and the Latin America. So it was very good. Nowadays, Brazil is a reality. Like, Brazil is like I can say it's a powerhouse in the match community, and we have great players: Paulo, Willie, Pedro, Thiago, a bunch of new players coming out, and then they're gonna do great. So everything's so different from my last Pro Tour. The coverage, like the side, everything. You guys like just improved the Pro Tour a lot. So it's way more satisfying to be playing the Pro Tour than it used to be.
Very kind of you to say. Now, you did very well, as you said, Grand Prix Atlanta. What did you learn about this Kaladesh limited format?
Well, what I learned is that like stay away from blue. It's pretty hard to build up a very good blue draft deck. I really like green more than white. I think white's better, but I prefer green because of the creatures, and you can build like energy decks, or you can go like black green, even blue green, black blue green red. All the combinations are like okay to play. So I'm always trying to draft green and stay away from blue. That's what I learned.
All right, there's some stuff for you to take into draft leagues at home. Carlos Ramao, good luck the rest of the way. Hopefully we get to talk to you more this weekend. If we do,
Brian.
try to be a little shorter, please.
Sure, that's fine.
And sending it back to you, Rich.
That is a big guy right there. And one of the big names in Magic is waiting for us over at the video wall. It's Luis Scott Vargas, and it's time for Draft Viewer with Pro Tour Gatecrash champion Tom Martell.